All right, well, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Janie. Welcome, Monica. So good to see you. So glad you joined us today on this absolutely beautiful cold day in the mountains. I'm Sumaya Abuhaidar. I know the two of you know that, who are on the call with us today. Um, but we're also going to be speaking to the number of folks who might want to listen to the recording. So for those of you who don't know me, who might be listening after the fact, I'm Sumaya Abuhaidar, and I'm here with my partner, Jason Berv, from, we're partners in Blue Dot Coaching. Jason, do you want to just wave and say hi? Everyone can see you.
Hello, everybody.
So we're thrilled to have you join us for this monthly free webinar that we do. It's always wide open for anyone who wants to join, and we address different topics on each month that might be of interest to people. So the topic for today is navigating the holidays. And that's what we want to share some insights about what that might mean. And you know, the inspiration for this probably is obvious, but I'll go ahead and share anyway that what's been so interesting for me this past month is how many conversations I've had with people about how stressful this stretch of time in December into early January, how stressful that looked to so many people that I've spoken with. And that's, Jason and I see things quite differently about this stretch of time and what's possible. And we feel like there's no reason really for the holidays to be a challenge, and that it doesn't take much to nudge us out of that well-worn path, if you will, of looking towards what's stressful rather than looking in a different direction. So that was really the inspiration, to just throw out a few ideas that might shift that dynamic, that might make it just a little bit easier to navigate this stretch. So, you know, what I would love to start with is what I've noticed whenever I ask people about why they're feeling stressed about this stretch of time, or why they're feeling anxious about the family gathering that they might have coming up, whatever it might be. What sticks out at me the most is that the answers I get back really seem like it looks like an outside-in world to those who I've spoken with. It seems like what's really causing the stress and causing the upset it sort of falls into two categories. One is what I would call the trappings, which is, it seems like sometimes people can get focused on you know, having the house clean for house guests, or the perfect meal, you know, or contributing the tastiest dish, or whatever it might be. Or it could be travel logistics, or whatever, the trappings of the holidays. And often it seems like we get pretty focused on those things, and we get pretty focused on our ideas of how they're supposed to be, and they start looking pretty real, and they start looking pretty outside in. And then the second category of things is relationships and people. It seems like however far many of us get in our journeys, and however grounded we might feel, it seems like there's still some anxiety that comes up about being with extended family members, potentially falling back into old patterns and ruts in being around family members, and how that might push us off our center, so to speak. And that also, in what I hear from people, also has a flavor of looking very outside in, looking like it really is, you know, my parents' behaviors that are annoying or frustrating, or whatever it might be. Or it really is my kids' choices that are stressing me out. Or it really is, you know, my sister and all her well-worn paths of how she behaved that's really frustrating me. And that looks like that's inevitable somehow. And so I guess what I would want to start us off with by really reminding all of us, us included, is that it's not an outside-in world. It is absolutely 100% an inside-out world. That it is at any given time our thinking about all those things, and only our thinking about those things, that causes us stress and struggle. And that our thinking at any given moment is a product of our state of mind. Or even if you want to call it state of being, if you want to go a little bit broader than just our small mind, whatever state we're in, that's what's being projected. That's the quality of thinking that we're going to be experiencing. And when we remember that, that changes absolutely everything. It changes our relationship to what we're experiencing. So, going back to these two categories of things and what this might mean as we look ahead to this stretch of a couple weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be, here's what might shift. So the first category of things is the trappings. What it might look like to really understand that it is inside out and that it's state of mind, what that might look like for us is that we might catch ourselves in our stories about how important it is to have everything perfect and how critical it is to have a clean house or whatever all those things are. We might flip that priority and know that what matters most is our state of mind. And that whatever we experience in our relationship, however we're going to experience this stretch coming up, is going to be first and foremost, the most important variable is the state of mind that we're in. And so to prioritize that above all else would mean, maybe it's better to have a slightly dirtier house. Maybe it's better not to worry so much about, getting the right meal or whether or not, X, Y, or Z, whatever it might be, but rather to prioritize whatever we need to be in the best possible state of mind. So flipping the priorities and knowing that that's the key thing. And then it's the same thing with relationships that we might be a little anxious about. Those relationships that seem to push our buttons, so to speak. And that what could be really powerful about remembering that it is truly inside out when it comes to those relationships is that as soon as we start to feel the tension, and the tension might be anger, it might be frustration, it might be overwhelm, whatever it might be, that's just tension. That the moment we feel that tension, that it be nothing more, nothing less than a flag going up saying, uh-oh, state of mind is in the toilet, state of mind is low. That tension, that those feelings are our own barometer about where we are. They say nothing at all about the person in front of us. They give us no objective truth whatsoever about our parents, children, aunts, uncles, sisters, all those people around us. They simply tell us something about where we are. And so again, it's an invitation to remember that it's an inside out world and to prioritize whatever it might mean to be in the best possible state of mind. Maybe it means taking a 5-minute walk. Maybe it means cutting out of an event early. Maybe it means just walking from one room to another and taking a breath. It doesn't really matter. There's no formula. There's no technique. It's different every moment. If we take that pause and notice that it's our state of mind and that we're feeling that tension, that it's an invitation to listen to our own wisdom. What do I need to be in a slightly better state of mind? And what does it mean for that to be the only thing that really matters? And that maybe whatever I choose, if I choose to step out and take a walk, maybe somebody will take that personally, think I'm being standoffish or selfish or whatever they might think. That's fine. That's not an issue, that I can prioritize that knowing that that is the most important thing and not really have to get caught up in other people's thinking, in other people's judgments about what my choices might mean. Because ultimately, if I'm in a good state of mind, in a sense to say, the deeper feeling I'm in, the less I'm caught up in my thinking, the less I'm believing my stories about the past and past wrongs and judgments about people in front of me, the more likely it is I'm going to be grounded, I'm going to be compassionate, I'm going to be able to connect and feel some love and some joy with whoever's in front of me. And so what else could possibly matter? What else could be more important than that? So staying with, the understanding that it's inside out, what the tension, the feelings mean, that they're not a reflection of anything outside me, but rather me and where I am in that moment. And really giving ourselves permission to take care of ourselves and whatever that means. And again, it doesn't have to mean action. It doesn't have to mean anything outward. It can be just a purely internal taking care, but just knowing that that is the priority. If we prioritize that, no matter what it is we're doing and what we're faced with, it's going to help us. You know, the outcome is going to be improved if that's the priority, because that is the key variable. In the end, that's what I'm really wanting to share, is that is the most important variable in any given situation. Everything I'm experiencing is going to be nothing more and nothing less than a reflection of that, of the state that I'm in that moment. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you for what's occurring to you as you listen to that.
Great. Thanks, Sumaya. Well, what I thought of as you were talking is, I've never really thought of it this way before, but I really appreciate what you're saying about state of mind. And I actually love state of being. I've never heard that before, but that's great. And I remembered when I was first really getting accustomed to this idea that state of being is the most important variable. And I remember how important it used to look to me that I get out on a bike ride. And I remember feeling frustrated when there were times when I couldn't. I didn't have the time, or like today it's -20 and there's snow on the ground, or whatever it might be, and I'm not able to get that bike ride because it looked to me like that's the way that I could get back in touch with a better state of mind. And I remember the shift or the insight I had that had kind of two parts to it. One was realizing that it wasn't the bike ride that did it. And so, for me, it was trying to notice on my bike rides when my mind felt better. And I could never actually find that moment because it wasn't something that I was doing. It was something that I stopped doing. I stopped hanging on to my thinking so intently. And as soon as I kind of let my claws out of those thoughts, they kind of fell away. And I realized that had ultimately nothing to do with the bike ride, because I'd go on bike rides sometimes and I'd finish the bike ride and I'd still be just as, claws into my thinking as when I started. But most of the time I wouldn't. But I realized, so it's not the bike ride, it's not the walk, it's not that cleared my mind, it was my relationship to my thinking. And so I realized that it had less to do with some activity or something that I was doing, and more an awareness of what was happening for me with my thinking. And so that felt really liberating. And I think that's been really helpful when I found myself in circumstances where it doesn't feel like I have the opportunity to peel away from the situation. But what I thought of that was new as I was listening to you talk was, I was thinking about all those times when we've had late night drives back to our home in a rural location, and how there have been many of those drives when I felt really, really tired. And being tired is not something that I can kind of, just wave a magic wand and it goes away. Being tired is something that happens to us, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a natural thing. Our bodies feel energy, our bodies feel less energy. And our state of mind, our state of being is like that too. There are times when we have more clarity, more presence, and there are times when we have less clarity and less presence. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a natural thing. And what I thought about with this driving and being really tired is that, well, I can't necessarily make it go away, But if I'm aware of how tired I am, then things will naturally occur to me, what to do. Sometimes it's, turn up the music or my favorite podcast. Sometimes it's roll down the window. Sometimes it could be pull over and take a little rest, whatever it is. But if I'm bringing my awareness to that situation, then something will occur to me to do to, as you put it, Sumaya, get in a slightly better state of being, or in that, in the driving, a slightly more alert state of being, right? And so eventually what I've noticed on those drives is that the tiredness, that wave of really, being really tired, being exhausted, it passes. And then I feel more alert and more capable, and I'm kind of back to doing what I need to do to get us home safely. And I think the same thing is true when we bring awareness to our state of being when we're, in a situation that formerly may have looked like that's what's causing us stress and upset or discomfort, is that if we can just notice that we're just passing through these moments in time where our state of being is low or cloudy or unclear, however you want to think about it. And that the more awareness we have in that moment, the more we naturally have access to whatever makes sense in that moment. Maybe it means, well, geez, I'm really cranky right now, so I'm not going to participate in this conversation. Or it might mean, boy, I'm going to pretend that I need to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to go hide out in the bathroom for a bit. Or it might be, I'm going to go, see if I can help with the dishes, or whatever occurs to you. That's just like, when I'm tired and I'm driving, I'll do whatever occurs to me that makes sense. And so I would just want to leave people with these twin messages of hope. What you're sharing, Sumaya, is we're not stuck. We're not stuck in circumstances that are causing us to be upset. We're not stuck in circumstances and there's no escape when we see that it's an inside out experience. And if we have the opportunity to clear our mind, well, then that will undoubtedly help. And if we feel like, boy, I don't know if I can do something right now, or I tried it and it's not working, well, then we also can find this message of hope. That the more awareness, the more aware we are of our state of being, the more we open up to what naturally occurs to us to do, while this temporary state of affairs moves through us in a really natural way.
Thanks, Jason. That was super helpful. I love how you put it together, and I like the analogy of driving and being tired. And what I really hear in what you're sharing was essentially what I would call non-resistance. Like when you're aware of what you're experiencing, and you combine that awareness with a deep understanding of how our experience is created, really understanding that inside out nature of how our experience is created, what's causing it.
Sorry about that.
And with that awareness and that understanding, you just let experiences come through you without feeling like you have to latch on to thoughts of whose fault it is and what needs to change and how other people's behavior needs to change, or how thoughts about how you can't take it and this is the last straw and I've heard this for the last 10 years, I can't take one more, whatever it might be, the stuff that we do. But instead of that, just noticing your own experience, knowing it's being created through thought and being okay with it. What I love about what Jason's pointing out is, yeah, we can't always shift it. I was recently in a thought storm that lasted 3 days, and then, yeah, it does shift eventually, but those things they're not always on our timeline. They come and they go, and sometimes they hang out longer than we'd like. And that's just being okay with that, but not losing the understanding that just because it's hanging out for a little longer, or just because it feels really intense, the rules don't change. It doesn't suddenly mean, but this time it's an outside in thing. This time it really is significant. This time it means something about someone or a circumstance outside of me. That's often the leap when something hangs out for a bit and we can't shift it. We start looking for meaning. We start looking for whose fault it is, or how we're justified in our reaction, or our anger, or our frustration. And that's the leap that can really cause us a lot of suffering. And it's a leap that we don't need to take. That we can, if again, we stay with these three magic ingredients, we understand where experience comes from, we stay aware of what we're experiencing, and we don't resist. We let it just come through. Then it's like we experience the whole range of stuff. We can experience difficult things, we experience good things, but our relationship to all of that is different. It has less of a grip. We feel less victim to it. We feel less like it's happening to us rather than being created through us. And that shift is really liberating. It gives us the capacity, the resilience to experience a whole range of emotions, reactions to things, or responses without taking them too seriously, without really going down the rabbit hole that's hard to claw out of. And so that's what I really like about what you shared, Jason, is it really points to that letting go that can come with understanding. That being okay with whatever experience we're experiencing because we understand where it's coming from. And we don't feel like we have to fight it. It's like when we really fight against an experience and start trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to get to, well, what's causing it? What does this mean? What do I have to do? That's when it really sinks its teeth and generally lasts longer, goes deeper, and gets us into, more trouble, especially when we're surrounded by the people who historically have pushed us to that reaction most often. So keeping all those things in mind, I don't think we have to go to that place. So I love what you just shared. I think it's really helpful. So was there anything else you want to share on that note, Jason, before we see if anyone has any questions?
Only that, as you were just talking, I saw, more in this metaphor about, those times when I resist during those drives, when I'm tired and I just want to be home, that resistance is what makes that experience suck, and when I'm not resisting the experience, it's when I can find enjoyment, even in, something that might look very different to me otherwise. I came home and shared with you not long ago how much I loved all these podcasts I was listening to. And some of them I was listening to because I was hoping they would keep me awake. And so, to think about that, a simple shift in understanding where our experience comes from can really, help us, buoy us, can give us the resilience to get through what we may have historically felt like is a challenging experience.
What comes to me about that I would love to share again before we open it up to questions is that I was recently having a conversation with a client who was frustrated with herself for the stress that she was experiencing, because she'd been exploring and living with this inside out understanding for quite a while. And so she felt like, well, I know better, right? I know that it's just thought, so why am I still feeling stressed about these circumstances? And where we ended up in the conversation was, really lovely, which is when you don't resist, when you don't have to judge yourself and go into that mode of, why am I experiencing this? And I should be able to think positive and be in a good state of being. And why am, all those kinds of things. That by itself, that non-resistance by itself loosens things, right? When you don't have to ask why and judge ourselves. And what this one client came to that she found really helpful is that when more challenging feelings or experiences arise for her, that she found something really loosened if she basically was like, huh, how curious. And what that meant to her is, wow, look what I'm creating for myself. How funny. And she didn't have to then dig, well, what thoughts am I having that are causing this? And how do I get rid of them? And, you know, that it was simply that little phrase for her of, oh, how curious, contained everything in it. It was the not judging herself. It was not the not resisting the experience, but it was also, there's a lightness. Curiosity for most of us has a lightness to it. It has an openness to maybe a little humor, maybe a little humility, maybe a little chuckling at ourselves that, yeah, we can get ourselves stressed out about putting on the nice holiday party or the upcoming move or this or that, whatever it might be, that, yeah, we're still human and we do that to ourselves. And that's perfectly okay. But there's something about curiosity that has a kindness in it, that has a lack of judgment, that has really an openness instead of a contraction, that for this particular client really loosened up her worry about being stressed, about why she was feeling stressed, about needing a different experience. It just lightened up her own experience, her own relationship to what she was experiencing. And, you know, I think that can be incredibly helpful. Again, each of us comes in our own way, through our own wisdom, to that which helps us most, to stay in the awareness, to stay in the understanding, to not resist. So it might look different for everyone. But being open to, well, what might it be for me? You know, is it something like, oh, how curious? Or is it something different? And whatever that is, that reminds us to stay in that feeling of being okay with whatever's blowing through, I think can be really quite lovely and really helpful. So on that note, we're gonna open it up and see if anyone wants to share a comment, a question, your own experience, a story that might be helpful, whatever it might be that's coming up for you. We would love to hear. So you can go ahead and just unmute yourself if you want to contribute and hop on, since we're kind of a small group today. It should be pretty easy. And if no one has any questions or comments, that's fine too.
Have I unmuted?
You sure have.
Thank you guys so much. I was very compelled to listen today, and I had a few other things on the schedule, but I'm so happy that I chose this. And I feel what was happening for me is this year I'm not very holiday oriented because I'm working on another project. But what was coming to me is how significant the word presence is, that was in your title. And what I feel like happens to us is we replay, we anticipate it, like tradition or, you know, things happening the same every year, that we start anticipating and we start creating the expected situation before it's happening. And I think presence, you know, if we have presence of mind or presence of practice or whatever, then we actually have the opportunity to not replay or fall into those expectations.
Jenny, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because you're so right that it almost makes me chuckle how much we put on certain, like how much meaning we lay on certain days of the year, certain times of the year, events. And you're absolutely right. It's like this huge weighty bundle of expectations and needs, and you know, bringing the past forward, and this is how it's supposed to be. And I actually think it's really fun to become aware of those things and to kind of chuckle at ourselves like, oh my gosh, look how much tension I'm creating for myself by creating a picture in my head, basically, of how this is supposed to be or how it's supposed to feel, rather than just being completely present and just noticing whatever it might be. Maybe it's joy, maybe it's this, maybe it's something new this year. You know, how funny is it that we label certain days, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and, you know, New Year's, and that those days have to be different than all other days. We have a story about how they're supposed to feel and who's supposed to be there and, you know, everything that comes with it. And to see what a thought created reality that is, and what a setup it is to be upset or disappointed, it's kind of a crack up. We all do it. You know, it's the most human thing. But as you said, the awareness that, oh, wait a minute, how much easier is it if I'm present and just curious, well, what is it going to be today? What am I feeling right this moment? You know, what is today rather than a year ago? And you know, I think there's that combination of just presence and allowing and curiosity is it's freedom from all those expectations, freedom from that story of how it's supposed to be, which almost always messes us up, because that's not how it works. Just because we have a story of how it's supposed to feel or look doesn't mean anything. It's almost always something different than that, because if there's one constant, it's change. And the story in our head is like expecting sameness where the rule is change. And that makes no sense whatsoever. That is just the biggest setup for upset. So Jenny, thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it. Jason, did you want to add anything before we see if there are other questions?
Well, I loved what you said too, Jenny, and I was reminded of how touched I was in the past, Sumaya, when you've talked about seeing other people, including those we love, fresh, seeing them fresh, you know, and we can only do that when we kind of fall out of our thinking and come back to the moment. And what I heard Jenny say was, my paraphrase is, what if we saw ourselves fresh? You know, then we wouldn't be carrying with us the thinking of, you know, who we were last year, or, you know, who we've been in the past, and so that gift of presence is being able to see the moment fresh and not be dragging all the baggage and all the weight of other times and other moments. And so I was kind of chuckling because pretty recently, Sumaya and I were putting up Christmas lights at our house, and I really wanted to do it because I love the way our house looks with the Christmas lights. And I kept on saying to Sumaya, do you want my help? Do you want my help? And she's like, you don't like Christmas. And I was like, yes, I do. I want to put up the Christmas lights, you know? And then we both kind of had a big chuckle. We got over it and we ended up putting up the lights, and we just loved, you know, it all worked out. But in that moment, it was an exception to what Sumaya so often extends to me, which is the seeing me fresh. And so the exception to the rule in this case was really entertaining to me, because I got to see, like, well, wait a second, that's what we do all the time, unconsciously, unknowingly, innocently, is we're seeing through these lenses that are not of the moment. And as soon as we take them off, we have a totally different experience. And that's what even the feeling behind what you said, Jenny, was I just got to take off those lenses and see it fresh, and it felt really good and really different. So thanks.
Well, what I love about that, Jason, is that, you know, if we really can, even just for the tiniest little moments, just take off those glasses of the past, let that fall away, and see someone with fresh eyes. The amazing thing is they really often surprise the heck out of us with what shows up. And that's such a hopeful and such a fun thing to think about, especially going into, you know, holiday events or stretches with extended family. Like, okay, what'll happen? Who will show up if I don't come with my suitcase of expectations from the past about who they are, right? My big old hammer of, I know exactly who you are and I don't think I like it much. You know, lovely things can happen, can emerge from that openness. when we're willing, and it doesn't take much. It's really nothing more, nothing less than having a neutral mind for a moment. And I've been experiencing that. I've been really playing with that neutral mind a lot lately. And a number of times when I've had things come up where I've noticed myself go into old patterns of judging somebody, or evaluating, analyzing, and then going, oh, what a relief. It's not my job. I don't have to do that. I'm like, that's what a nice rest, that's not my job, that I can just have a neutral mind and see what shows up. It's a really nice thing. And we can't do it all the time, but the tiniest little bit changes a lot. So, thank you, Tanny.
Thanks.
Let's see, Monica, do you have a question? I see you're unmuted.
Yeah.
Hi.
I don't know if I have a question. I first wanted
a
to
comment.
I enjoy to have lunch with you guys.
Yeah,
I see it here in my computer and also in my TV. And Nathan is here with me. I call him, you need to listen to this, So he was having lunch somewhere else and I call him here. And this is why I switch off my video, so you don't see all my food when I eat him. And I don't know if this, every time I have another comment in my head, and the last one that came is when you say, how great is when we take these glasses off to see the other people for who they are in that moment, like new all the time. And what came to me, I feel that also we have these glasses inside to wear ourselves, so it will be great also to take these glasses indoors, and to just renew ourselves in that situation, that maybe the situation repeat, but because we don't need to follow the same pattern inside, we can be different to the situation, not just to the external, to our internal, because I am like that. I am always like this. In this, these sentences, I'm not a morning person and I'm not a night person, and it's like, so all these things that we put to ourselves. So I'm curious, and I like a lot and I've been using that a lot, to say, I wonder, or I'm curious, what Jason was saying, or you say it actually. That you say this to a client, that because sometimes and this also I like, how I am still doing that, how am I still thinking, last night, I have a night like a little crazy before I went to sleep, and I keep on saying to myself, breathe deep, it's not about him, it's not about him, it's not about him, that him, that is not very far away from you. And I say, I will decide how I'm going to sleep tonight. And I know that I want to have a restful night, And as much with all the work that we are doing, because sometimes our client thinks that we are perfect, we don't have any more issues now. So how these things and how we continue to do it. But I feel that now is with more fun. And it's faster, First, I have a very good night of sleep. I sleep all the night. I wake up okay, and I could make a coffee to that him, even, and wasn't any more anger there, But that reminder, so I really enjoy the way I enjoy a lot the metaphors that you use, like with the tiredness, that we understand what happens when we are tired, So they're very visual, that I think that help us to understand more and more and more, and to remember more and more and more, that how much power we have in ourselves, that if we know, and we really can change the things. So anyway, so
thank you. What I love most about what you're sharing, I absolutely love that reminder that neutral mind, that seeing someone fresh is just as powerful, if not more so, when we turn it inward. You're so right about that. It is such a liberating, beautiful thing to see ourselves without our own stories, without that certainty that I am all of these things. You know, usually most of us have a pretty long list of I am, you know, everything from the little trivial things, the morning person, the introvert, the extrovert, I like these things and not those things. I don't really like to go to this kind of event. And we, you know, we have a long story. And especially when it comes to going to be with extended family, you know, we have such certainty. Well, I always react this way to that person. When so-and-so does this, I'm like that, you know, and it's like, well, what if that certainty that that's how we are loosens and we allow ourselves to be surprised by ourselves? In the same way, you know, we can be surprised by others who shows up when we take the glasses off. You know, I'm always surprised by who shows up when I take my own glasses off about myself. And I really, really love that. You know, I think it's sometimes those are the last glasses to come off, the ones we remember last.
Yeah.
Because they're so subconscious, they've been there for so long that we almost, you know, it's like they're sewn on and we don't even know they're there. You know, they're like the last ones to be seen.
Lenses, they are so much close to the eye, lenses
That's right, exactly. Yes, they're like contact lenses instead of glasses.
Yeah.
It's, oh, is there really something in my eye?
Yeah. Maybe we should stop by I am, you know.
That's right, that's right. Stop it.
We put the dot and exactly. I am.
Yes. No, I love that, you know, to think about exactly that, moving forward with the I am, and then curiosity and presence, you know, as Janny was saying, like being present, but what comes after the dots? What's showing up right now in this moment after those dots? And being curious about what emerges rather than certain.
I am question mark.
Right, that's right. I love it. Oh, thank you, Monica. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure that
awesome.
You do this Tuesday lunches.
Lunch, that's right. It's tea time.
Yeah, after my lunch.
Well, we still have plenty of time, so I just wanted to open up and see if, Justin, I see you just put your video back on. Did you want to hop in with any stories, comments? Oh, we can't hear you just yet. Not sure why. I see you, but we don't hear you. We'll just give you a second, Justin, to sort out the technical stuff. Sorry if it's proving to be difficult. Oh, wait, there you are.
How about now?
Yes.
Sorry.
Now we've got you.
So that was great. And it's great to see you both, by the way. And
good to see you.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of interesting overlap in threads, but I think to say it as concisely as possible, I guess what I'm appreciating is how often we show up acting from a place of being in our memories, as you all were sort of pointing to. But I think there's sort of another layer to this, which is when you're with a group of people, especially a group of people, whether it's your family or colleagues, who have seen you sort of grow up, or even worse, they know you from 10 years ago, and now you're back into a situation with them where there was sort of an unspoken culture or set of communication rules that everybody sort of operated by. It's very easy to slip back into that, and then sort of fall back into that personality or to that role. And it's, sometimes that's fun. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think when you're sort of aware of, especially in a situation where you don't necessarily want to play that role anymore, that there is this freedom to actually just, to actually be different, even though maybe your family has this tradition or culture or way of being that you may not relate to. So I've been seeing that more and more in various relationships, and where it may not be real time, where, if you show up differently, people may not respond positively to that even. But even that's okay as long as you sort of don't get caught up and resist a negative reaction. And that's what I've been seeing more of, is how by kind of understanding that people are going to go at their own pace and do what they do, the connection to presence is sort of the antidote, if you will, to all of that, to where no matter how anybody else reacts in a situation, you can still be neutral to that and not get sucked in. And that sort of neutrality and being okay and not reacting to somebody else's negative reaction, even if it's not right away, it can have a healing effect over time. And there are a couple of examples of friends, myself, but friends also that I've had a chance to talk to and work with a little bit. And in one case, this is the fist bump story, which is great. And there's a guy who had a business partner who's also his brother-in-law, and they'd had kind of a stressful relationship. And the brother-in-law walked in and went to go talk to his business partner / brother-in-law, and he was coming from a place of wanting just to connect with his brother more deeply, and sort of broke the pattern and walked up and gave him a fist bump, like a high five, which he doesn't usually do. They don't have that kind of relationship, but that's what came to him in the moment as a way to sort of break the ice and connect. And it kind of shocked the relationship in a positive way, and kind of changed the dynamic that day and created an opening for better communication. And a couple of days later they got into a conflict, and rather than sticking with the conflict, which is what they had historically done, they stood up and took a break and kind of came back to the conversation later. So it's been really wonderful for me to see how practical it can be, just to see how that sense of presence can be really powerful in changing a relationship, even if only one person sort of is more present and kind of changes their approach or takes accountability for their action or their approach to a situation. And that is something similar happened with some sisters that I had been talking to who had, a long-term pattern, long-term sort of conflict in their relationship. And one of them saw her role in that relationship differently and started to show up differently in the way she appreciated and approached her sister. And that had a really freeing effect, and changed the dynamic of the relationship, where it was less like judgmental and expectation based and more just seeing her sister as doing the best she could and being more supportive of her from that more neutral place. And that had a really, really cool effect on her personally, but also their relationship, and took away a lot of the pressure and the tension. So just love what you guys are saying. I think it's so simple and so important and helpful. So thank you. Thanks for doing these.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I'm so glad you brought that up, because, especially the first part of what you shared just reminds me of, the way Sumaya has put it in the past that I love is, it just takes one to tango. Because I'm thinking of client conversations that I've had where one member of a couple says, I'm feeling so much better, but it seems like my partner, is still upset, is still caught up. And in that moment, the focus is on, I really want this person to have a different experience with me. But when we kind of pull back and come back into the moment and look at, well, how is your experience different? Is your experience, more or less tense? And they said, well, actually, I'm enjoying myself more. I'm not as upset. And if we just, like Monica was saying, if we just stop there, right? Instead of, saying, I'm feeling better, but now I want my partner to feel better. I want my partner to be different. Well, if we just stop at, well, actually, I'm feeling better. I'm having a different experience of this situation. That when we get to just have our attention fall on that, we come back to feeling a nice feeling, you know? And so this idea that you were sharing, that, you know, it really only takes one person. It just takes yourself to have a different experience of your family, of your friends, and their reality, their experience. Well, that's kind of, what should we say, after the ... right? And so that's going to change all the time. But that's well beyond, you know, our control, well beyond what's up to us. And so this idea that it just takes one to tango and we can have a different experience of any circumstance is really cool. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. What I love about what you brought up, what I think is also really important in it, is that sometimes very naturally it happens for most of us. When we start to see that inside out nature of life and our role in it and the role of thought, we see what other people, how other people are living outside in. You know, what you were describing about, well, you show up differently, but other people that have known you for a long time are still stuck in their story and they're not aware of it and they expect you to play a certain role and go into certain patterns. We can have two very different reactions to that. You know, one reaction is to be frustrated or judgmental about that. Like, why aren't they just seeing me fresh? And that can be really, it can be, you know, annoying. It can be a whole new source of tension. Or we see some, you know, family members or whoever, colleagues act in certain ways, and we can get judgmental about how they're doing it to themselves or how they don't understand the inside out nature and just go into, you know, that kind of frustration. Or if we stay with the things that we've been talking about today, which is really understanding how it works and really, you know, being aware, then we know it's human and that we do it too. And we understand exactly why they're stuck in their story about who we are and why they're expecting us to show up in the same way. And we understand why they're behaving in certain ways because they're really stuck in their ruts of certain thoughts. And there can be so much more compassion, or at the very least, neutrality. You know, at the very least, maybe it's not like real love and compassion in that moment, but maybe it's just a neutral mind about it. Like, oh, it's not my job. Yay, I can put down, I can fire myself from the job of judging somebody else for being stuck in an outside-in world and really taking their thinking seriously and then behaving in certain ways. Like, oh, that doesn't have to mean anything to me. You know, I can just see it with neutral eyes, a neutral mind, just like everything else, and therefore not have to react to it, not have to get frustrated that someone's expecting me to show up like I did a decade and a half ago, just because they're stuck in their thinking, you know. And you know, and it's totally understandable if we do the first, but again, everything you're describing it's such a good reminder about all those dynamics and how staying aware, staying in the understanding, and being okay with all of it, being okay with other people getting stuck in their thinking, being okay with getting stuck in it ourselves, like watching all of it, it becomes a little bit like watching a movie, you know, rather than
TV.
Yeah, it's like watching 3P TV, and that can give us a little bit of distance to chuckle at ourselves, chuckle a little bit at other people, go, oh, look, humanity, look what we all do, look how we all create all this, you know, interesting kaleidoscope of experiences, and just not take it too seriously and not have to react to it. So I really, really love what you were sharing and what that reminds us to keep pointing towards. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Just one other question for you. I don't know if we have time now, but maybe some to reflect on or talk about later. But you had mentioned sort of you had a 3-day thought storm. And I just happened to have a conversation with somebody about, you know, sort of this, what I kind of think is sort of the illusion of a sustained funk, you know, and we were talking about, you know, so it feels like sometimes we'll have a period of time that might be days or sometimes weeks or sometimes maybe even years where it seems like we're in a low spot for a connected period of time. But I guess, you know, question / comment on this is that I think that's an illusion, and really moment to moment, it's kind of up and down, but it just sort of averages out as sort of a low point, it seems. So I was kind of curious if you've seen that, or, you know, because it's like within that funk period, you probably had some nice experiences too, right? So anyway, I'm just thinking about that because it just kind of came up in a couple conversations, and I've also experienced that too, where it's like, you know, well, that week sucked. So,
well, you know, it's really interesting that you bring that up. I think that is common to all of us. You know, the two things that occur to me about it, one is the universe doesn't have a sense of time the way we do. It doesn't care about days and weeks and months. You know, if you have a big enough perspective, that doesn't mean anything. There is no schedule for how thought storms, how fast they're supposed to go, or, you know, that those are just made up rules about what we should be experiencing or not. But the second one really brings to mind a conversation I had with a client yesterday, where it was pretty clear to me that she was gracefully navigating ups and downs and living her life beautifully and being in the moment. But that on top of that, she had what I called a meta narrative, evaluating the whole. And it wasn't a very rosy picture, right? The picture that she made in her head about what she's been experiencing was a little bit gray tinged, like, oh, things aren't great. But when as you pointed out, when I really helped her see, well, wait a minute, is that narrative really true? Turns out it really wasn't. That it was just a perception. It was just a story. Now, that's not always the case, but it's, you know, I think extremely rare for somebody to just be really, really low and stay there and not experience variation, whatever it might be. And as soon as you see variation, as soon as you see the up and down, your perception of what you've been experiencing changes, and it opens something up. You know, so I think people often have a perception of where they are and how it's just really low all the time. I never experience anything else. I'm depressed all the time. And when you really probe, you know, kindly probe into that, you find something that their experience is actually much more varied. It's quite different than what their perception of it is. And then the conversation starts there and really loosens something like, oh, it's not as stuck as I thought. You know, okay, well, let's point to those places where it wasn't and try to make sense of it. And then understanding develops from there, and then, you know, can really shift things. So
that's great. I just saw some new with that notion of a meta narrative. That's really helpful. So awesome.
it's another job we can fire ourselves from.
Yes.
Create meta narrative about how we're doing. Because it doesn't mean anything.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, we are just about 1 o'clock. So appreciate all of you for joining us. It's such a fun conversation. We really loved having you, and hope everybody has a beautiful, wonderful, joy-filled or messy, whatever it might be, holiday stretch. It's all good. And look forward to seeing you at a webinar in January. So happy holidays, happy New Year. Great to have you all.
Yeah, lots of love to everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.